Hey everyone, so I just wanted to jump on here and film my positive birth story. I know that when I was pregnant I watched a lot of birth stories and birthing vlogs, and it really helped me in terms of just changing my focus and preparing me for birth. I think it really changed my mindset around birth and what to expect, and I found it completely invaluable, the things that I gained from it. So I wanted to share my experience in the hope that it makes someone else feel excited for birth. So just a quick disclaimer, there is no right or wrong way to have a birth. Every woman does what she can during the process, and it's so special and sacred for each female. So whether you choose to have a C-section or medicated or anything, I just wanted to share my experience and let other women know that it is possible to have a natural, unmedicated hospital birth. Without anything further, let's jump into it. So I did a lot of prep in terms of my birth. I think a big aspect of my birth story is the preparation that I did leading up to the birth. So I watched a lot of vlogs, and I'll link in the description below which ones really helped me. And I watched a lot of videos that May Gaskins had produced, and I read her book Guide to Childbirth, and it completely changed my view. It made me really excited for the birthing process, and learning the different hormones that come into play at different parts of birth really made a difference in getting me excited and ready for birth. So I did a lot of prep work, and I just wanted to familiarize myself with the process. I didn't want to be caught by surprise. I watched a lot of different women birth in a lot of different ways, but I always made sure that it was a positive birth story, just so that I could clear that room and visualize what I wanted for myself and not focus on the negative things that can happen during birth. So a lot of my prep work, like daily, I would be watching vlogs daily, getting myself ready, and it definitely helped. On the night before my daughter was born, we went to bed just like normal, except that I felt a little bit busy and a little bit uncomfortable. I kind of felt a little bit period crampy, but it wasn't anything intense. So I think in that last little bit of pregnancy, you're kind of waiting for it to happen at any point. I was a week early, so I wasn't super convinced that I would be going into labor, as this was my first labor, my first child. So I didn't really know what to expect, apart from the things that I had heard in other birthing stories. So we went to bed, and I probably fell asleep at about 11 o'clock, and then I woke up at 3:30 the following morning, and the period pain that I was feeling was starting to feel like it was coming in waves. So this was really inconsistent. This was still happening at like 12 minutes apart, and then 9 minutes, and then 3 minutes, and then 13 minutes again. So this was like a really up and down thing. This was not happening in waves like established labor does. So the period cramps were sort of like coming and going, but they were definitely coming in waves. So I really had the idea now that this was starting to happen. So when you're getting your Braxton Hicks contractions at the end, it was even lighter than that. It was kind of like your muscles were very lightly contracting, but the most of the sensation was actually that period cramp, or in that region. Now I know a lot of women experience it in their back and all sorts of different places. So this is obviously just where I experienced the sensations. So I probably was getting up and down like for the toilet for about another 3 hours. At about 6 o'clock in the morning, I had a bloody show. So it was just like I'd had my period while I was going to the toilet, and it like no pain. It wasn't like a full-on mucus plug either. I know a lot of women get like a bloody show and have, you know, like a gunky sort of thing in the toilet. I didn't have that. It was just the bloody show. That's when I realized that things were starting to really happen. Okay, I'm definitely going into labor. Whether this section lasts 1 day or 2 days or 3 days or stops altogether and starts back up again, we weren't really sure. So we didn't really want to tell anyone, although my partner did have to tell work so that he didn't have to go. So after he did that, we made a great big breakfast because I assumed that I would need all of the energy that I could get. So we made toast with eggs and avocado and tomatoes, and we had orange juice and coffee and all of the things, because I had assumed, yeah, I'm gonna like build up some energy to like get me through the day. And then after we finished breakfast, the contractions, I couldn't really eat during them. So at the start it was fine. I was just sitting on a chair and, you know, eating breakfast like normal and having a normal conversation. But by the end I was sort of like, all right, I can't really eat during them. I need to like concentrate. I decided that we should watch a movie, and we put on Silver Linings Playbook, which was a great film, and I hadn't seen it before, so it was a great distraction. And obviously a movie lasts for about 2 hours, so at this point it was probably between 9 and 11 we were watching the film. And at the start of the movie I was fine. I could like breathe through them. Some of them were really strong and some of them weren't at all, but they were definitely starting to come more in a rhythm, probably about 9 to 10 minutes apart. And as the film went on, I would start moving into different positions that felt a little bit better, and the contractions were getting stronger. So by the end of the film, I was really starting to breathe through the contractions, like having to stop and sort of center myself. Now I was doing some square breathing. I don't know if that's what it's called, but during my research that I had done, I had read a ton of stuff like hypnobirthing and this and that, and I found that breathing in for 4, out for 4, in for 4, out for 4, and you visualize a square as you're going around. I don't know why, but that really helped. It gave me something to focus on and some sort of rhythm. And also mentally, you know that the contractions are only going to last a minute, so you feel them build up, and then once you're at the peak you can feel it tailoring off. So once you've gone over that peak, that crest, you already know that the contraction is starting to fade away. And in between the contractions you feel totally normal, completely normal, like could hold a conversation normal. Well, I could anyway. So I ended up ringing my mum at that point. So I actually birthed our daughter in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, and I myself am from Australia. So I rang my mum, who was back in Australia, and just to let her know, yes, it's happening, and that we had timed it wrong. She was obviously meant to be there for the birth, but I had gone early. Anyway, so I chatted to my mother for about another hour, and I still wasn't getting any closer together, but they were getting more intense. So by the end of the conversation, I was having to sort of like groan my way through them and really like move my body. It really felt good to be like on my hands and knees, and I would just like lay on the bed and let out some noise, and it sort of just balances out that energy. So you've got, you know, all this pressure and intenseness sort of coming down, and it just felt good to sort of let it out the top. So I spoke to my mother for an hour, and then I thought, all right, look, I really want to start getting things going and start getting the contractions in a more regular pattern. Maybe we should go for a walk. So me and my partner ended up going just down to the supermarket at the end of our street and walking the aisles for a little bit. We actually grabbed some hospital snacks because we had not packed my hospital bag at the time. So we were kind of slowly doing that over the day as I was in labor. So we went down, grabbed some snacks for the hospital, and then came back. Now, when I was outside, I realized that my contractions weren't as intense. I think I was kind of holding back. I was a bit more reserved because I was also super aware that there was people around me and people watching me, but then they were coming more regular. So when I got back home, they got more intense, but then they seemed to not be as close together again. So I jumped in the shower. This probably would have been at about 1 o'clock, I'm gonna say. And I jumped in the shower and just sat in the bottom and let the hot water run over me. And the hot water was really nice in between the contractions. It sort of gave me something to focus on, and I could just concentrate on feeling the warm water like on my skin. And that was a nice break in between. The worst thing you can do is focus on the next contraction. And I can't remember, but I think it was May Gaskins, and she had said the worst thing you can do is focus all of your energy anticipating the next contraction. You're in labor. The next contraction is, 1, definitely going to come, and 2, going to be more intense than the last one. So the worst thing you can do is sit there in this beautiful break that Mother Nature gives you and stress and tense up and anticipate the next contraction. So it was really nice to feel the hot water on my body, let myself relax, almost kind of like forget you're in labor, and then prepare yourself for the next contraction. So I sat in the shower for about an hour and a half. I would get in and out over the next couple of hours just to sort of like move my body and just move where I felt comfortable. At one point I did try listening to music as well, which was a bit of a downer because it did not distract me at all, and I was super disappointed because I'd put in all this effort to make a labor playlist and then could not stand having the headphones on. Anyway, so I was jumping in and out of the shower, and obviously the contractions are getting more and more intense, so you're kind of getting a bit louder and you're sort of really forgetting reality a little bit during the contractions. Like the sensation of everything like tightening up is all that you can really focus your attention on. So after I'd been getting in and out of the shower, I did that for the next few hours. It got to like 5:30 and I was thinking, okay, I'm getting really close. This is starting to get really intense, and if I'm not getting ready to push, I'm really considering having to go and take some medication or something. It was starting to get really intense. So by the time we finished packing the hospital bag, my partner rang the hospital just to make sure that we had a bed. Now, I still wasn't 5 minutes apart, which is what the hospital asks you to be before you come in. I was still at like 7-8 minutes. I never really got that close together until I got to the hospital, till I got to like the pushing stage. So he had rang the hospital and said, yes, my partner's having contractions 5 minutes apart. So we kind of lied when they told us to come down. So we finished packing the bag, we called an Uber, and then walked downstairs and jumped in the Uber on the way to the hospital. Now, the Uber driver was fantastic. He was super chill. I was really worried about my waters breaking while I was in the car, and he was like, don't even worry about it, I've got wipes to clean it up. And he was super stoked. I think he probably went home and was like, you'll never guess what happened to me at work today. So that was quite funny and kind of relaxed me a little bit, because it was a little bit of like a weird situation to be in an Uber and be in labor and on the way to the hospital. It just felt a little surreal and funny. So we get to the hospital and we were in the waiting room, and I remember seeing some heavily pregnant women on the other side of the waiting room, and I did not want to freak them out. So I was trying to not be super vocal during the contractions, and I really just like went within and was kind of like breathing through them again, like doing that like 4 square breathing. And having a count really helped too, because I knew the contractions were only lasting a minute. So being able to sort of like count the time that I was breathing in and out gave me something to focus on that wasn't the pain or how long it was going to last. So I was in the waiting room and the nurse came and collected us, and I had like 2 contractions on the way to onto the examination room, and another one when I got onto the bed. So at this point, when I got to the hospital, they had started getting really close together. And I think that is because once I got to the hospital, I knew I didn't have to go anywhere else. Like, I think when I was laboring at home, a small part of me knew that I had to get from our house to the hospital, and I couldn't really fully let go and get into it. Whereas once I got to the hospital, I knew that was it. We were here to have a baby. So hopefully, if I was dilated enough. So anyway, we get into the waiting room, and because I'd had so many like back to back, the nurse had said, let's get a midwife and let's get you examined, and then maybe we can get you to a delivery suite. So the midwife came in and she said, okay, during your next contraction, I'm gonna check to see how dilated you are. It's not super comfortable, but you just do it. I mean, it's something that most hospitals will do. I was 8.5 centimeters when I got to the hospital, and I was so thankful. I remember just like being like so grateful that I was 8.5 centimeters and that we were getting ready to have a baby, and I knew that it would be over soon. So we were moved directly to the birthing suite, and at this point I could still kind of have a conversation in between contractions. So I cannot stress enough, like, use the time in between your contractions to just let yourself relax. Me and my partner were having a joke at the time, and these were all techniques that I had read in the guide to childbirth, is just, you know, giving yourself techniques to let your body relax. So we get into the birthing suite and it's just me and my partner, and I'm sort of just moving into whatever feels comfortable at this point. I loved being able to just sort of like get into my own groove and feel my body and know what my body needed at the time. And I liked that I was so far along because I knew mentally that it wasn't far away. So I also gave me sort of like the strength to go through without any other medication, I guess. And I knew that I was so close to the end that I could do it. So we had from 9 to 10 centimeters, the contractions got really intense. So during this time, my waters actually broke and there was a big gush and it goes everywhere. And it's like the smell of the amniotic fluid is really strong, like really strong. It doesn't really, I can't even like it to anything. It just smells how it smells. That's the worst description. I'm sorry. When you smell it, you'll smell it. It's basically all over your legs. And then the urge to push started to get really, really intense. So at this point, it was sort of just like building on the edge of my contractions. Your muscles would sort of like tighten up and you would almost feel like you were bearing down a little bit. Once my waters had broken, this sensation became so much more intense. Like you can't control it anymore. So it was literally, it's kind of like when you vomit and all the muscles in your stomach tense up. You can't stop it. Like if you're about to vomit, you can't stop all your muscles and not let anything come out. It just has to happen. And it was kind of exactly that same sensation. So like everything tenses up and you can't do anything about it. So I remember actually laying on my side and I was pushing on my side at the start. And I think a part of me was a little bit scared, like it was getting really intense and I was losing the control that I thought I had during labor. So I was laying on my side, kind of pushing, but kind of not working with my body. And I knew at the back of my head that I was not making any progress. And I remember looking at the midwife and being like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like I was so tired and a little bit hesitant and I was just over it. Like I just wanted to like run away. And she kind of looked at me and was like, there's no one else that can do it. And I think although it may not seem that encouraging, it was exactly what I needed to hear, because after that I was like, yeah, you're right. Like the baby's coming anyway. So I ended up flipping over onto all fours, which was kind of a position that had come to me like throughout the day. It just felt the best. It felt like what I needed to do. And I remember mentally thinking like, get out. Like I was ready now to get this baby out. I was like, done. I'm like, it has to end. Like I'm finishing right now. And I remember starting to work with my pushes and the midwife was like, you need to like tone it down, because I was letting way too much energy out up the top. And she was like, you need to hold in some of that energy and focus it downwards instead of up and out, which kind of makes sense. But I don't know, I felt like at the time I wasn't really ready for it and I was trying to balance that out. So I focused on pushing energy down, and the ring of fire is exactly what it feels like. It is intense sensation, and your whole, like all of your skin is stretching all at the same time. Like I didn't tear. I'm super, super thankful. It was one of my biggest fears, but it's an intense feeling. And I remember feeling the top of her head kind of going in and out and in and out. And I know that I had read earlier, like that's a good thing, like it prepares the skin and it helps you like to stretch that little bit so that when they do come out that you don't tear. So like I could feel it coming in and out, and then it got to a point where like she'd actually crowned. So she'd stopped going in and out and the largest part of her head was sort of like halfway out now. So within the next contraction, the rest of her head was born. And I remember in the distance, someone saying, the head's been born, the head's been born. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, I've done it. Like the hardest bit is over. And someone said, look down, look. And I was on all fours. So I looked down in between my legs and her head was there blinking at me. Like I'll never forget her face blinking at me. Crazy. And someone said, just grab her. And I obviously just like put my hands down and pulled her out to like, and put her straight on my chest. And I just remember like the feeling of everything going like back to normal is the most satisfying feeling ever. But then obviously like you've got your child finally on your skin, and she was so wet and hot and slimy, and I remember rubbing her back, and she let out just a little cry. I just wanted to hear it, so I knew that she was breathing. And I remember looking at my partner, and it was probably full on like deer in headlights kind of expression, because I was in so much shock. Like I had no words. I didn't know what had just happened. It was like all of these hormones and emotions like flood you all at the same time, so then you almost like feel nothing. And all my muscles were shaking from the fatigue and that adrenaline during the labor. And the nurses had to sort of like help me to turn over and lay on my back so that she could like lay on my chest. And I remember just laying there and being like, I can't believe I've done it, like it's finished. And going through childbirth and seeing what a woman's body can do is just the most incredibly rewarding thing. Like I just am so proud of my body and so grateful for what my body's done. It just blows my mind that I got through it and that I was able to do it. And it all happened so quickly. We were only at the hospital for 2 hours and then she was born. So I didn't have time to really consider options. Not that I needed them, and not that they wouldn't have been there if I had have asked for them, but it happened so quickly and I was so in the zone that asking for medication or an epidural or any of those things, it kind of just didn't need to happen. And it's not like I went in there ruling them out. I just felt like I didn't need them. So laying there and then having her latch straight at the hospital was incredible. And the feeling of having your own child on your chest, just like, oh, I wish someone had filmed it. I wish we had filmed our birth. Like it just would be a most amazing thing to look back on and have an outside perspective, because so much of all of this sort of like happens within. Like I really can't explain well enough the emotions that come along with giving birth. It kind of feels like a different reality, really. Like you doesn't feel like you're here or that it happens here. It's kind of like it happens somewhere else. It's the weirdest thing and the most amazing thing a woman's body can do. I wish that everyone can have a beautiful birthing experience, and I know that not all women get that, and I am so lucky to have such a beautiful experience and the exact experience that I wanted to have. And yeah, I just wanted to share this story so that women can feel confident and maybe a little bit calmer going into their own birth. And hopefully I've helped someone along the way. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.